Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Good morning and welcome to the weekly review. I'm your host, Paul Hazard, and with me this morning is John Gibbs and Leanne Lax. You're very welcome, both of you. How are you doing?
Doing well.
Yeah, good, thank you.
It's been a funny week. Twitter seems to have gone really quiet, especially where teachers are concerned. I don't know if they're migrating elsewhere or they're just kind of lying low before they go back. Traditionally, it's the silly season in the press, and we're maybe going to look at a silly story or two. We had A-level results this week, and that's a big pressure for a lot of families, a lot of children, a lot of schools. And the Premiership has started. And in my book, those were unofficial indicators that we're all going back to school very, very shortly. So, yeah, no, it's not good to think about it. To cheer you up, we have 3 interesting stories and 3 great shows to talk about this morning, which we will do right after these messages.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. John Catt have an exceptional collection of book titles that cover a range of educational topics, ideas and research. The books are aimed at forward-thinking schools and support best practice teaching for both primary and secondary education. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order.
Our first story this week is a strange one. Google and Selena Gomez partner to fund teen mental health in the classroom. Now, I find this a really vexing story for so many reasons. It's full of possibility and potential, and yet every step carries suspicion with it, and mental health is so important. I just wonder who should it be handed over to, who should be involved. Now, look, the populist view may be that any money that's aimed at improving mental health must be good. But John, if I could come to you first, can I put it to you, John, that this is a modern day Trojan horse?
I think, yes, you're right to be suspicious. Well, absolutely. A combination of celebrity and giant multinational corporation doing something good. Warning lights should go off. You should think, well, is this quite as good as it seems? On the one hand, yes, money if I was at a school and they said, oh, we're getting a lump of money from Google, who've got lots of that stuff, and they're going to give that to us to spend on improving mental health for our students. We're going to buy some stuff to put in the classroom, some posters to put on the walls, we're going to hire someone, whatever way it's spent, you'd say, well, as a school, that's good. And I remember being at school once, I had a load of televisions donated to the school. This was in the United States. They had a bunch of televisions donated to the school on the grounds that they would all be free. This is when you had televisions in the corner of the classroom. And they'd all be free, except you had to show a 30-second thing produced by the people that were providing televisions, which is advertising, basically. Yeah. And that was the early indicator. What Google's real business is selling advertising. And they sell advertising through a most extraordinarily clever system of manipulating our sense of ourselves and our consciousness. Yeah. So Google, who are in the consciousness changing business, presenting us with this plague of fantasies that we engage in, are now going to try and put a sticking plaster into schools to heal the problems. I use Google all the time. Of course I do. But I can't help thinking that I'm not as I was, along with the rest of humanity. And the sticking plaster going off to schools will encourage us maybe to think that the big corporations aren't so bad. And when we go on Google, we can do it conscience free. Yeah. That the real business of Google is business.
Yeah. That's what I did. I can't help thinking you're right there. Yeah. I did a little bit of research this morning. Now, Google is putting $25 million into this project with Selena Gomez, which seems great, seems fantastic. But when you think that Google make almost $1 billion a day, it's loose change. It's not even loose change. Leanne, it seems funny. There is an acknowledgement in the article that people don't really know what even works in terms of mental health and and students and young people. Is just throwing money at mental health, is that going to work? Do we not need a much more structured and approach?
Yeah, it's another job for a teacher to do, basically, in the classroom. And I think there's two sides to the story, not as an article, but in general to the story of mental health. There is a lot of training out there for teachers, and within this money from Google, they say they're going to design half-hour training sessions in collaboration with organizations to help educators navigate these challenges. So again, it's putting the onus on teachers. And I love a good CPD that you can put into place in the classroom. I eat it up. I think most teachers would. I sit in training sessions waiting to write something down that I can implement in my classroom. Mental health, as you say, is huge. I don't know that it's something a half an hour session is going to help a teacher to deal with in the middle of a maths lesson while 3 children don't know what you're talking about and the rest are getting on with their work and there's a child having a mental health crisis. There is a lot that teachers do, and this is a massive extra piece to put onto a teacher. Then again, you've got a celebrity. My question is, why a celebrity? John answered the question. Google are there to advertise. You need a celebrity to advertise, I guess. And she says that few people are in a better position to help do this than teachers. She is possibly right. Position you're in as a teacher, whether you have the ability as the teacher to do it is another question. But it's the $1 million question, I think.
Yeah. The $1 million question. And I think you're right. I mean, a half-hour session funded by Google isn't really going to cut it.
No. Can I add to that?
John, yeah.
Totally, absolutely agree what Leanne just said there. I mean, the idea, it's a sort of myth we have that because we imagine it really, because teachers are in front of kids and they see them in many respects more for longer numbers of hours than their parents do, they must be hugely able to solve their problems, to deal with their emotional difficulties, to be social workers, to be psychologists. In fact, that's very far from the case. The actual experience of teachers in school is that they're very, very busy delivering a crammed curriculum. And there's very little time to deal with mental health issues or whatever. And anyway, when mental health is a delicate thing, don't do it badly.
Exactly.
Do not do it badly. You do it badly, you do more harm than good. Now, I don't know. I bet we've all experienced these sort of training. Have you ever done those online training things where you say, well, this term, everyone must, and the HR department will pick up whether you've done it or not. You get a snotty email saying, you haven't done your health and safety training. And you realize it's just something you can literally guess the answers to. Multiple choice, guess. Oh, didn't pass. Do it again. Passed it. Tick box. There you go. Have a feeling that will be the level of in-depth training on mental health teachers will get.
I actually think that if there is a discussion now about funding in schools for mental health, then let's fund mental health specialists to be in schools.
Yes.
That's where the funding should be going.
Yeah.
And 25 million won't cut it.
No.
Won't.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, he who pays the piper calls the tune, and we'll watch that story with a lot of interest. Anyway, on to our second story this week. And this story is another emotive story. Should we abolish exams? Leanne, should we abolish exams?
I think it's possible for some subjects that it should be a mixture of exams and coursework. I know it's that with coursework now, people are worried about AI and ChatGPT, all of that, and they are concerns that should be had. I know for me, and I actually looked back at my high school Ofsted report a couple of years ago, and And we've talked about kind of teaching for critical thinking. And there's also, I feel like, do we teach children how to prepare for exams? Because I think that's a massive exam. And then there's also the issue with exams is that we're taught as teachers to differentiate all the time, to make sure you are able to get to every child. And then at the end of the year, we give them an exam. Everyone gets the same exam. So those seem to be very conflicting pieces of pedagogy. I don't know what you want to call it, but I think I don't think it's a blunt yes or a blunt no, because I think it does work for some subjects, and children do need to be taught how to retain knowledge, especially nowadays with information able to get to it like that. But I think how exams are laid out should be a point of discussion, and how you prepare children for an exam.
John, this article is written by Sammy Wright, and I think when you read the article, you get a very clear sense that he is a teacher. He's a practicing teacher and an author, and that comes across very strongly. But he makes the point that the purpose of exams is to assign social worth to individuals and to entrench existing privilege. You know, those are big claims. Is he right in that? Is that what exams do?
100%. Yeah, absolutely. That is what exams do. That's their primary function, is to differentiate social worth, to filter the population, to send the goats in one direction, the sheep in the other direction. That's what they are for. They also are an edifice of illusion. They create the idea that somehow we're in a system that is in some ways meritocratic, when it's not. It's deeply and profoundly unfair. The exams themselves are deeply and profoundly unfair. They're saturated with unfairness and privilege and advantage for some students and disadvantage for another. And generation after generation of students leave school gaslighted into the belief that somehow they didn't cut it really. They didn't do what they were tested in some mechanism that was fair and found wanting. How many people come across this that say to you, "Oh, I didn't do very well at school. School wasn't good for me. I wasn't good at school." Then they've internalized the guilt of an unfair system that is designed to produce a high proportion of failure. You're right. When Sammy Wright in this article says, he says, "I'm a creative writing teacher," and I realized that in order to teach creative writing, I had to be so precise about the criteria for success in the exam that I had to disregard the actual process of creative writing, which is spontaneous and creative and imaginative, and instead teach the exam. How many of us do that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exams poison everything. They poison the system. I would get rid of exams or have them so minimal that they're effective just a certificate of you did school.
Yeah.
The world wouldn't fall. It wouldn't be bad. We'd go back. My father left school without any qualifications at all. Ended his career as traveling around the world as an engineer, working on aircraft simulators and things. True, would have been better if his education hadn't to go through building sites and things on the way. But he was self-taught, and every employer he went to had to assess his worth. Well, that would be what would happen. It would be full of unfairnesses as well. But exams poison school. Get rid of them.
And they only test knowledge. There's the flip side of the curriculum, which is a big thing now, is skills. How do you test a skill in an exam?
Yes.
I'm not sure you can.
Or the skill you test. Sorry, Paul. The skill you test is the part of the exam.
Mm-hmm.
Acquiring quotations you'll never need again in life about Shakespeare or something, or formulas you'll never use again in mathematics you'll never ever be required to learn again. And how many of us in life actually sit in an exam on a wobbly table and write stuff for 3 hours?
Leanne, there are some alternatives that he suggests, and as a writer, of course, he gives a kind of metaphorical suggestions, and he talks about, like a driving test or judo belts. And, I presume what he means there is, and John alluded to this, you do your 12 or 14 years of school and you either get through or you don't. And there might be alternatives for that. Is the driving test or the judo belt association or metaphor, is it too simplistic? Would it not work in life?
No, I think there are, like I said, some subjects where an exam is probably necessary. And I think there are some subjects where you don't need to assess via exam. And I mean, throughout the PGCE, there's no exam. There are some career paths where you want to be assessed practically. And there are some subjects where, like creative writing, for example, shouldn't be a tick sheet. I know in year 6 to get greater depth, it's not really a tick box. It's more of a, have you written for purpose? That kind of testing tests for the subject and doesn't test for what you've retained when you've been studying and revising in your bedroom for however many hours a night. So I do think there are two sides to it, and some subjects possibly yes and others no. Even like some parts of a subject yes and other parts of it no. So let's say, like, for example, with maths, there are some parts of maths that you do have to just memorize. And there are other parts where you get children that can reason and problem solve, where it's more of a skill that's been taught.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it depends on the subject, the part of the subject.
Yeah, although I would get rid of exams to a point where they virtually became something like the belt system, or you completed school. Leanne, you're right in saying that you can't divorce teaching from feedback. And feedback, I mean, you do something for someone and someone says, no, that's not correct. Well, that is, in a sense, you've just failed that moment. Feedback and assessment in learning, and learning with assessment embedded in it. Yeah, that's fine, of course. And that will be there in some form or another in the way we teach. But what we do at the end of our current system, and far too much in this country, is give you a grade. Grades that people like Dennis Sherwood and others will show are fairly unreliable to a grade either way, to a large extent. Manipulated by standard deviations and so on, which shift the exam boundaries so that one year you're one grade, 1 year another. And you carry that grade through life. Oh, I only got a B in maths. It means nothing. You might have done an A another year or a C another year. So really reduce the number of exams. But yeah, you've got to have some form of feedback assessment is inevitable.
And I think that's probably, the moot point, isn't it? I think we're all in agreement. All teachers would be in agreement. We don't do exams well, but we don't really have a viable alternative at the minute. So on to our story for this morning. This story is an exclusive that appeared in 4 or 5 newspapers, but that's it. It's Britain's first teacherless classroom. And the headline reads, now pupils get AI maths and English lessons in teacherless classrooms, but it can't do art and sex education yet. Anyway, 20 pupils will follow their GCSE course, and they'll be taught throughout by AI, artificial intelligence. No teachers. There will be learning coaches in the rooms. There'll be laptops, and there'll be headphones. Now, we used to call that a study, but it's obviously something different nowadays. Principal John Dalton tells us we are witnessing a quantum leap in education. John, if I could come to you first on this question. Is this, and it's really dehumanizing of teaching and learning, is this just dangerous sci-fi that we are actually able to do at the minute?
That's an interesting, as a teacher who's, my career was teaching, and it's sort of embedded into me the idea, I'd like to believe I made a profound difference in the lives of some people. I like that thought, and I hope I did. But you'd sort of know that if you drop dead, you'd have been replaced the next term, or you leave that school, the next teacher comes in, they do just as good a job as you, really. So I want, my initial reaction to this is to say something like, no, a computer could never do what I do. There's that mystical something, that personal touch, that bit of humor, the way you've presented it, and so on. I love to think that about myself. I remember years ago, I was playing. I had the illusion I was quite good at chess, and I played someone who was actually very good at chess, and they beat me in minutes, and I realized just how bad I was at chess. And in a peevish sort of way, I said something like, "Well, one day, this was 50 years ago or something. I said, the previous sort of thing I said, well, one day computers will beat people at chess. And he explained this, they'd explained to me that can never happen because there was a bit of human intelligence that was sort of creative and intuitive that computers will never reach. Well, they have. And I think computers will teach. And I suspect they'll do it pretty well. And it'll be a tool, and we'll be there, us humans, doing things differently. But it will come about. And one day I'll go and see a GP, and it'll be an AI thing, and it'll be more reliable than any GP. And the pilot driving the plane will be an AI machine, and more reliable than a pilot. And lots and lots and lots of other jobs as well.
Okay,
it'll be better for it, probably.
Okay. Leanne, if I could ask you about a different aspect of this. Now, in the pilot school, 20 pupils are doing this. It is a fee-paying school. Parents are paying £27,000 a year. Mm-hmm. Is that just for the privilege of a computer teaching their child? Are parents going to go for this?
I was going to add to it that, it is a private school that are trialing it. Are you going to get true results from that? I don't know. I do agree with John, actually. And actually, a few years ago, I implemented like a maths homework. It was an app that you set the homework and the app changed the questions based on how the kids were doing. So I must be honest, I quite liked the idea of it for homework. I don't know, in the classroom, like John says, you're not going to get the personal touch. You're not going to get like the understanding of where the child comes from, of the child's home environment, of like who are the child's siblings, and what do we know about the siblings, and what do we know, like where's the handover from the past teacher, of they understood this but they didn't understand that. There is that argument of at what point does a robot understand emotion, and you need that in teaching. So
all of which is really vital. Yeah. John, just as a final kind of question on this topic, the implication, could quite easily be, that we no longer have confidence in teachers. I mean, you've both said AI is much more reliable. You'd be happier or safer in a plane that's flown by AI than a person.
Yes.
Is the logical conclusion to this then that we will have a global school and a global curriculum?
Oh, I don't know about. Yes, that's a thought. You're throwing at me a curveball there, because I've thought of that one before. The idea that it would standardize learning. I respond to that. I don't like the idea of that at all. Hopefully it would individualize. Hopefully, we'll see, won't we? It will be there probably, just about. It will individualize learning and make it more responsive to the individual. That would be good. As Leanne says, differentiation, how many times I've thought, I must differentiate my lesson. I've got a range of ability here. Or in any class, even schools with a strict streaming and so on, you have a range of ability, and you're not doing it. You're not challenging that kid, and you're leaving that kid behind. You know that in every single lesson. So it would be great if AI became more individualized. I would like to think, as we head off into the future, that it would end the tyranny of schools themselves. We're a long way from this, but the whole idea of putting kids in large groups among groups their own age, of abilities that you can never reconcile entirely with one with the other, it would be wonderful if schools themselves slowly disappeared into the future. Not teachers, we're doing something, and there would be something that would replace schools. It would be education of some kind, but the monolithic institution, the hot classroom, the bored kids staring out the window. It'd be great to think an end to that. And it is. Some people will say, well, it's more reliable than teachers, but they're not all teachers are great. I remember, particularly coming across when I was at school, a particular teacher I could name. He'd have to be 110 or something now, but a particular teacher I can name put me profoundly off mathematics.
Oh yeah.
Only one thing.
But he was particular, his particular.
We all had those, yeah. We did.
So maybe there would be some place for AI that was more.
I'd like to think, going back to what we've spoken about a few times, that there are some skills that are taught in education that you would hope a robot can't teach.
Yeah.
Well,
And I do take your point, Leanne, all of those human things, empathy, understanding,
Yeah.
and all the things that motivated us, just telling a child, be motivated, learn this homework, it will be good for you. I mean, it's empty, it's passionless, but a good teacher can go sit with that child and help that child become interested, hungry for learning, and really see their success and see it progress. That's all we've really time for on that story this morning, except to say that our two panelists are, of course, irreplaceable. Now, before we go on to our show,
am I not an avatar, though? You don't know.
Oh, we didn't think of that.
Yeah.
We're going to have to get
same jumper as last week,
We're going to have to get a DNA check for next week. Let me tell you about our sponsors, and this show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbooks.com to explore the full range of titles. And if you use the code JCTTR2425, they'll give you 20% off your order. On to our final segment, and that is Shows of the Week. I listened to a lot of fabulous shows this week, and one that really stood out for me was your show, John. And you looked at prison education, every bit as difficult, challenging, rewarding, and essential as you thought. Great title as well. What a fabulous topic to come up with, because it just doesn't come across people's consciousness often that, prisoners they benefit a lot from education. So it's often overlooked. Is an excellent expose on the barriers, the difficulties, the problems that teachers and prisoners face, but how creative as well they are in getting around them all, and how much, there is satisfaction and so on in working with prisoners. Great show. Highly recommend it to everybody.
Thank you.
John, what about you? What did you listen to this week?
Well, I'll go with a classic piece of Teachers Talk Radio, which was Tom's late show, which was looking at, is it possible to actually teach critical thinking? And again, a bit like, will AI replace, teachers? You think, no, of course not. And then you think about it, you think, I don't know. This was, is critical thinking to be taught in schools? Of course it should be. And Bridget Phillipson had made some speech where she said, we need to teach critical thinking. And you think, first response to that is yes. But listen to this show. And you think to yourself, I'm not now certain I know what critical thinking is. I'm not sure you can teach critical thinking. And I think the teaching of critical thinking should be thought about critically, which is what this show did. So you end up thinking, I sort of know more about this than I did before this show. And I know that I'm not as certain as I was before. And it beautifully explored the idea that knowledge and power are inextricably linked. So even when you try to teach unideologically, in an unbiased way or whatever, and present things as critical, you've almost always got some sort of value assumptions behind it. And all the guests, including Claire Fox from the Institute of Ideas, was there. It was like an episode of the Radio 4's Moral Maze. In fact, it was better.
Of course it was. Of course it was. Leanne, what about you? What caught your eye or your ear this week? Because we are in view as well quite often.
So we had an Olympic special for education tonight with Lucy and Hannah, who are
great show. Yeah,
regularly on education on our Sunday show. And it talked about lessons that can be learned from the Olympics. And there were many teachable moments. Just a few that I picked out were where the surfing was stationed. Loads of geography involved in that. Tom Daly coming back to train, got a bit of perseverance, maybe got a PSHE lesson there. The sportsmanship of Alex Yee, and also North and South Korea being able to share a podium. So loads of stuff, loads of teachable moments coming out of the Olympics.
Well, that's really all we've time for this week. Many thanks to the panel, Leanne and John, and of course to the team in the background that make this all happen. Enjoy your week, everybody. And if your classes or your family or anybody is getting GCSE results on Thursday, good luck with that. We'll see you next Sunday, same time, same place. Bye, everybody.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.